The nightmares came every time Adrian Voss closed his eyes, so he simply stopped trying to sleep more than an hour at a time. He would jolt awake in his small cabin with sweat soaking through his shirt, the phantom screams of dying men still echoing in his ears, the acrid smell of burning flesh somehow clinging to his nostrils, even though the war had ended 8 months ago. 8 months since the Treaty of Broken Stones had been signed. 8 months since he had walked away from the battlefield and tried to find something resembling a normal life in the frontier territories, far from the cities where veterans were either pitied or celebrated, neither of which he could stomach. The cabin he had claimed sat on the edge of the thornwood forest, a day's ride from the nearest settlement. It was rough, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it was his. The previous owner had abandoned it years ago, and no one had contested when Adrian moved in and started clearing the overgrown fields. He spent his days working until his muscles screamed, hoping exhaustion would grant him mercy. It never did. Tonight was no different. He had managed perhaps 40 minutes of fitful rest before jerking awake, his hand instinctively reaching for the sword that no longer hung by his bedside. He had buried it in the woods 3 months ago, unable to look at the blade anymore. Now he lay in the darkness, staring at the rough-hewn ceiling beams and listened to the autumn wind howl through the trees. That was when he heard it. A sound that did not belong to the wind or the creaking cabin or the nocturnal animals that prowled the forest edge. A low, rhythmic humming. Melodic and strange, rising and falling in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. Adrian sat up slowly, every soldier's instinct flaring to life despite his exhaustion. He moved to the window, careful to avoid the floorboards that creaked, and peered out into the moonlit clearing around his cabin. At first he saw nothing. Then movement caught his eye near the tree line. A figure, tall and broad-shouldered, was walking along the edge of the forest. No, not walking. Swaying slightly, as if injured or exhausted. The humming continued, and Adrian realized it was coming from this person. He grabbed the hunting knife from his table and moved to the door, easing it open. The cool autumn air hit his face as he stepped onto the porch, his bare feet silent on the weathered wood. The figure had stopped moving now, standing perhaps 30 yards from his cabin, silhouetted against the darker mass of the forest behind. "Who is there?" Adrian called out, his voice rough from disuse. He rarely spoke to anyone these days. The humming stopped abruptly. The figure swayed again, more pronouncedly this time, and Adrian heard a sound that might have been a gasp or a groan. Then the person collapsed, falling heavily to the ground. Adrian's heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct told him to go back inside, bar the door, pretend he had seen nothing. Strangers in the night meant trouble. Always had, always would. But something about that humming, that melody he had heard, tugged at a part of him he thought had died on the battlefield. The part that still remembered what it meant to be human, to help someone in need. Cursing himself for a fool, he moved down the porch steps and crossed the clearing. As he drew closer, moonlight revealed details that made him slow his approach. The figure was large, yes, but the proportions were all wrong for a human. Too broad through the shoulders, too thick in the limbs. And the skin, what he could see of it, was not any shade he had ever seen on a person. He stopped a few feet away, knife held ready but not raised to strike. "Are you hurt?" A groan answered him, followed by movement. The figure tried to push itself up, failed, and collapsed again. Adrian could hear ragged breathing now, labored and pained. He took another step closer, and the moonlight finally showed him what he was dealing with. Green skin, darker than spring grass but lighter than pine needles. Tusks, small but unmistakable, protruding from the lower jaw. pointed ears visible through a mass of dark hair that was matted with something that looked black in the moonlight. Blood, he realized. A lot of it. An orc. A female orc, based on the curves visible beneath the rough leather and furs she wore, and she was badly injured. Every lesson from the war came rushing back. Orcs were the enemy. Orcs were monsters. Orcs had killed his friends, his brothers in arms. The peace treaty meant they were no longer shooting at each other on sight, but it did not mean they were friends. It did not mean you invited them into your home or offered them aid. Adrian stood there, frozen between old hatreds and something else. Something that whispered that this was not a battlefield, and this orc woman was not an enemy soldier. She was just someone who was hurt and alone, humming a song in the night as if trying to comfort herself. He sheathed his knife and knelt beside her. "I am going to roll you over. Try not to fight me." She did not respond, which worried him more than if she had growled or cursed. He carefully turned her onto her back and sucked in a sharp breath. A deep gash ran across her side, from ribs to hip, and her left arm was bent at an angle that arms should not bend. Broken, definitely. The head wound was still bleeding, a nasty cut above her temple that had soaked her hair and half her face. "What happened to you?" he muttered, not expecting an answer. She was barely conscious, her eyes fluttering but not focusing on anything. He knew he should go back inside. Close the door. Let nature take its course. An orc this badly hurt would not last the night without help, and if he helped her, if anyone found out, there would be consequences. Humans who aided orcs were called traitors, sympathizers, worse things. And orcs who accepted help from humans were cast out by their clans, marked as weak or corrupted. But that humming, that strange, haunting melody, it had been the first thing in 8 months that had cut through the fog of his insomnia and trauma. For just a moment, hearing it, he had felt something other than exhaustion and despair. "You are going to make my life very complicated," he told the unconscious orc woman. Then he slid his arms under her, grunting at the weight she was solid muscle and probably outweighed him by a good 40 pounds, and lifted. His back protested. His still healing shoulder wound sent a spike of pain down his arm, but he managed to stand. He carried her across the clearing, up the porch steps, and into his cabin. He laid her on his bed, the only bed, and set about gathering what he would need. Clean water from the barrel by the door. The medical supplies he had brought with him from his military days. Meager but better than nothing. Bandages, needle and thread, the bottle of strong alcohol he kept for emergencies. This definitely qualified. Adrian lit 2 more candles and positioned them near the bed so he could see what he was doing. In the better light, the orc woman's injuries looked even worse. The gash on her side was ragged, as if she had been caught by a bear's claws or perhaps a large wolf. Infection would set in quickly if he did not clean and close it properly. He started with the head wound, carefully cleaning away the blood and matted hair. The cut was not as deep as he had feared, though it would definitely scar. As he worked, he found himself studying her face. She was younger than he had first thought, probably close to his own age of 26. Her features were strong, with high cheekbones and a broad nose, but there was something about the set of her jaw and the curve of her mouth that made her beautiful in a way that caught him off guard. He pushed the thought aside and focused on his work. The head wound cleaned and bandaged, he moved to the broken arm. Setting bones was not something he had much experience with, but he had seen the field medics do it enough times. He felt along the break, relieved to find it was a clean fracture rather than a compound one. Taking a deep breath, he gripped her arm above and below the break and pulled, simultaneously rotating to align the bones. The orc woman's eyes flew open, and she screamed. a sound of pure agony that made Adrian's heart clench. She tried to jerk away from him, but he held firm, feeling the bones slip back into alignment. As soon as they were set, he released her and grabbed the splints he had prepared, working quickly to immobilize the arm before she could thrash and undo his work. "Easy, easy," he said, using the same tone he would use with a frightened animal. "I am trying to help. You are safe." Her eyes, he noticed, were a striking amber color, almost gold in the candlelight. They fixed on him with a mixture of pain, confusion, and fear. She said something in a language he did not understand, the words guttural but musical at the same time. "I do not speak Orcish," he said, tying off the splint. "Do you understand me?" She stared at him for a long moment, her breathing harsh and rapid. Then, in heavily accented but understandable Common, she said, Why what? Why help?" She winced as a wave of pain clearly washed over her. "Human, I am orc, you should. Leave me." Adrian picked up the bottle of alcohol and the needle he had been threading. "That side wound needs stitching or you will bleed out by morning. This is going to hurt. A lot." "You did not answer," she said, but she was already fading again, the brief surge of consciousness ebbing. "I do not have a good answer," Adrian admitted. He poured alcohol over the wound and she hissed but did not scream this time. "You were hurt. I had the means to help. Simple as that." It was not simple at all, but he did not want to examine his motivations too closely. He set the needle to her skin and began to stitch, each pull of the thread drawing the ragged edges of the gash together. She passed out again halfway through, which was a mercy. By the time he tied off the last stitch, cleaned and bandaged the wound, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky outside his window. Adrian sat back, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep, and everything to do with the emotional weight of what he had just done. There was an orc woman in his bed. He had saved her life, and he had absolutely no idea what happened next. He stood and moved to the chair by the cold fireplace, too tired to build up the fire, too wired to do anything but sit and watch his unexpected guest breathe. She was stable, he thought. Probably. If infection did not set in, if fever did not take her, if she did not wake up and decide that being helped by a human was an insult worth killing him over. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty room. The orc woman slept, and for the first time in 8 months Adrian did too. He had not intended to, but exhaustion finally claimed him, and he slumped in the chair by the dead fireplace and fell into a dreamless sleep that lasted 3 full hours. He woke to the sound of movement and was on his feet instantly, soldier's reflexes overriding the fog of sleep. The orc woman was awake and trying to sit up, her good hand pressed against the bandaged wound on her side. Her face was pale beneath the green of her skin, and sweat beaded on her forehead, but her eyes were alert and focused, on him. "You should not move," Adrian said, keeping his distance. "Those stitches will tear if you are not careful." She froze, those amber eyes tracking his every movement. "You are real, I thought perhaps. Dream, fever dream. Very real, as are your injuries." He gestured toward the bed. "Please lie back down, you have lost a lot of blood." For a moment he thought she might refuse out of pride or stubbornness. Then she grimaced and slowly, carefully, lowered herself back onto the pillow. "My arm," she said, noticing the splint for the first time. "Broken. I set it as best I could." Adrian moved to the water barrel and filled a cup. "You should drink." She watched him approach with the wariness of a wild animal, but when he held out the cup, she took it with her good hand. She drank deeply, desperately, and he refilled it twice more before she finally stopped and handed it back. "Thank you," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "I am Kreshka of the Iron Ridge clan." A shadow passed over her face. Former Iron Ridge clan. Adrian Voss, no clan, just Adrian. He set the cup aside and pulled the chair closer to the bed, but not too close. What happened to you? Those wounds, they look like bear, Kreshka said flatly. Black bear, desperate with hunger as winter approaches. I was hunting too far from camp, alone. She flexed the fingers of her broken arm, testing them, and Adrian saw her wince. Stupid, very stupid. Hunting alone is always a risk. Not alone by choice. Her jaw tightened and he saw something painful flash in her eyes. Cast out, 3 days ago, told to leave clan lands, never return, so I went into the forest and the bear found me. Adrian knew he should not ask. Getting involved in her story, in her life, was a terrible idea, but the question came out anyway. Why were you cast out? Kreshka was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral, as if discussing someone else's tragedy. My brother went to war, human war. He fought for the Iron Ridge, fought well, killed many humans. She looked directly at Adrian. Perhaps you knew him, perhaps you fought against him. Adrian said nothing. He had fought orcs, killed orcs, watched orcs kill his friends. The war had been brutal on both sides. He died, Kreshka continued. 3 months before the treaty was signed. Died for nothing, as it turned out, since peace came anyway. Her hand clenched into a fist on the blanket. His body came home. I saw what was done to him, saw how young he was, how afraid he must have been at the end. And I said that the war was madness, that humans and orcs dying for the pride of chiefs and kings was madness, that we should have sought peace years ago. That does not seem like something worth exile. You do not understand orc culture, Kreshka said bitterly. To question the war is to question the honor of those who died. To speak of peace is to call our warriors cowards. My father is chief of the Iron Ridge. He could not allow his daughter to spread such poison, as he called it, so he cast me out. Better a daughter with no clan than a daughter who shames the clan with weak words. Adrian felt something twist in his chest. I am sorry. Why, you did not cast me out. No, but I understand. I left my own people in a way. Came out here to get away from everyone who wanted to talk about the war, about honor and glory and sacrifice. He laughed, a bitter sound. I do not sleep, you know, have not slept a full night since the war ended. The things I saw, the things I did, they follow me into dreams. So I just stopped sleeping. Kreshka studied him with those unsettling amber eyes. The humming, she said suddenly. You heard me humming. That is why you came out. Yes, it was. Adrian struggled to find the words. It was the first thing in months that cut through the fog. What was it? That melody, old lullaby, from my clan, passed down through generations. My mother sang it to me when I was young. I sang it to my brother when he had nightmares. Her voice softened. I was singing it to myself, I suppose, trying to remember what it felt like to be safe, to belong somewhere. Then I collapsed and you found me. They sat in silence for a while, 2 broken people brought together by chance and a half-remembered song. Finally, Adrian stood. You need food, and I need to check those bandages, but first I should tell you if you stay here, there will be complications. For both of us. I know, Kreshka said. Human who shelters an orc will be outcast. Orc who accepts help from human is weak, corrupted. We both know the rules. She met his eyes. I will leave as soon as I can walk. I will not bring trouble to your door. You can barely sit up. Then I will leave as soon as I can stand. Adrian shook his head. You will leave when you are healed. If you go out there in your condition, you will die. Infection, fever, wild animals, or just simple blood loss. And then what was the point of me stitching you up? Why do you care? It was a fair question, and Adrian did not have a good answer. Or rather, he had several answers, and he was not sure which one was true, because helping her felt like a way to atone for the orcs he had killed in the war. because her humming had given him the first moment of peace he had felt in months, because she was a person in need, and he still had enough humanity left in him to care about that. "I do not know," he said finally, honestly, "but I do. So you will stay until you are healed, and we will deal with the complications if they arise." Kreshka looked like she wanted to argue, but another wave of pain clearly washed over her, and she grimaced. "Very well. But I will not be a burden. I will help as soon as I am able. You can start by staying alive and not tearing those stitches. That will be help enough." Adrian moved toward the door. "I am going to make some food. You should rest." He stepped outside, grateful for the cool air and a moment alone to process what he had just committed to. An orc woman, living in his cabin while she healed. Days, maybe weeks, of close quarters with someone who should have been an enemy. It was foolish and dangerous and probably going to end badly for both of them. But as he gathered wood for the fire and checked the small garden plot where a few stubborn vegetables still clung to life before the frost came, he realized something. For the first time in months, he felt awake, truly awake, not just going through the motions. There was a purpose now, something beyond simply surviving until the next nightmare. Inside the cabin, Kreshka lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. Her body screamed with pain, but her mind was racing. A human had saved her life, had taken her into his home, tended her wounds, and was now making her food. It went against everything she had been taught about humans. They were cruel, treacherous, not to be trusted. Yet this Adrian had shown her nothing but care. She thought about his eyes, the deep weariness she had seen in them. The way he had spoken about not sleeping, about running from the war. He was broken just as she was. Two outcasts, each fleeing their own people, their own traumas. Perhaps that was why he had helped her. Not out of pity, but out of recognition. One wounded soul seeing another. The smell of cooking food drifted through the cabin, and despite everything, the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, Kreshka felt her stomach growl. When had she last eaten? 2 days ago, 3. She had been in survival mode since the exile, focused only on moving forward, putting distance between herself and the clan lands. She had not thought about what came next. Adrian returned with a bowl of thin stew, mostly broth with some chunks of potato and wild onion. "It is not much," he said, "but it is warm and it will give you strength." He helped her sit up, propping her against the wall with the blanket behind her back. His hands were careful, impersonal, the touch of someone who had tended many wounded. She took the bowl and ate slowly, letting the warmth spread through her body. "This is good," she said. It was not. Really, it was bland and watery, but it was warm, and he had made it for her, and that made it feel like the best meal she had eaten in weeks. Adrian almost smiled. "You are a terrible liar, but I appreciate the attempt." "I am not lying. Food given freely with kindness always tastes better than food eaten alone in the dark." Kreshka took another spoonful. "Where did you learn to tend wounds? You have done this before." "Army medics taught me some basics." "And you learn fast when your friends are bleeding out and the medic is 3 tents away." He sat in the chair again, his own bowl of stew in hand. "I was never very good at it, but I learned enough to keep people alive until real help arrived. You did fine work on my arm. And the stitches are neat." She gestured at her bandaged side. "I will have a scar, but I will heal. You will have many scars from the look of things." Kreshka shrugged with her good shoulder. "Orcs collect scars like humans collect coins. Each one is a story. This one will be interesting, at least. The human who saved me. You make it sound like a ballad. Perhaps it should be, though neither of our people would sing it." She finished the stew and handed back the bowl. "The Iron Ridge would say I should have died rather than accept human help. And humans would say you should have left the orc to rot. Yet here we are." "Here we are," Adrian agreed. He took the bowl and stood, You should sleep more. Your body needs rest to heal. So does yours, Kreshka said, pointedly looking at the dark circles under his eyes. When did you last sleep a full night? 8 months ago, give or take. He moved to the fireplace and began building up the fire. But I will be fine, I am used to it. You should not have to be used to it. She watched him work, noting the careful precision of his movements, the way he seemed to be always braced for something to go wrong. Will you tell me about the nightmares? No. The word came out harder than he intended, and he softened it with, not today, maybe not ever. Some things are better left unspoken. My mother used to say that pain shared is pain lessened. Your mother was an optimist. Adrian finished with the fire and dusted off his hands. I need to check the traps and do some work around the property. Will you be all right alone for a few hours? Kreshka wanted to make a joke about being a fearsome orc warrior who could certainly handle being alone, but the truth was the idea of him leaving made her anxious. What if her injuries were worse than they seemed? What if she fell trying to get up? But she would not show weakness, would not cling. I will be fine, she said. Go. Do what you need to do. Adrian hesitated at the door as if he also felt the strange reluctance to part. Then he nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. The cabin felt suddenly very empty. Kreshka lay back against the pillow and stared at the ceiling beams. Tears pricked at her eyes and she let them fall. There was no one here to see them, no one to judge her for weakness. She cried for her lost clan, for her dead brother, for the family that had cast her out. She cried for the pain in her body and the fear in her heart. And she cried because a human stranger had shown her more kindness in one night than her own blood had shown in her last days with the clan. When the tears finally stopped, she felt hollow but clean, like a wound that had been drained of poison. She closed her eyes, and despite her intention to stay alert and vigilant, fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. Adrian checked his snare traps and found 2 rabbits, which would make a better meal than the thin stew he had scraped together that morning. As he walked the perimeter of his property, he thought about the orc woman lying in his bed. Kreshka. She had a name now, a story. She was not just the orc anymore, some abstract enemy or burden. She was a person who had been hurt by the same war that had broken him, cast out by her own family for speaking the truth. He understood that more than he wanted to admit. He had not been formally exiled, but he had left his unit, his friends, his family back in the capital city because he could not bear to be around people who wanted to celebrate the victory. They did not understand that winning the war did not erase the cost. That peace did not bring back the dead or heal the wounds that did not show on the body. But Kreshka seemed to understand. She had looked at him with those strange amber eyes and seen past the surface to the broken soldier underneath. And she had not judged him for it, had not offered empty platitudes or false comfort. She had simply acknowledged his pain and shared her own. It was more than anyone had done for him in months. He returned to the cabin as the sun climbed toward noon. Kreshka was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Good. Sleep was the best medicine for healing, and she needed all the help she could get. He set about skinning and preparing the rabbits, working quietly so as not to wake her. As he worked, he found himself humming. It took him a moment to realize what melody he was humming, the lullaby he had heard Kreshka singing the night before. He did not know the words, did not even know if it had words, but the tune had stuck in his mind. It was soothing, repetitive in a way that felt intentional. A song meant to calm fears and ease troubled minds into sleep. You have a good memory for music. Adrian startled, nearly dropping the knife. Kreshka was awake, watching him from the bed with an expression he could not quite read. Sorry, he said. I did not mean to wake you. You did not. The pain did. She shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position, but hearing the lullaby helped. You hum it well for someone who only heard it once. It is a beautiful melody. What is it called in Orcish? The title translates roughly to the stars remember. It is very old, from the days before the clans split and scattered. My grandmother taught it to my mother, who taught it to me. Kreshka's expression turned melancholy. I will have no daughter to teach it to now. No clan means no marriage, no children. The song dies with me. Adrian set down the knife and turned to face her fully. Do not say that. You are young, you have time. And just because your clan cast you out does not mean another would not take you in. No orc clan would take in a female who has been exiled for speaking against the war. I am marked now tainted, she laughed, but there was no humor in it. And even if they would, I would not go. I meant what I said. The war was madness, and any clan that cannot see that is not a clan I wish to join. So what will you do after you heal? I do not know. She looked away out the small window toward the forest beyond. Keep moving, I suppose. Find some remote place where neither orc nor human will bother me. Live alone. Her voice dropped. Die alone eventually. That is bleak. That is reality. Adrian wanted to argue, to offer some hope or comfort, but what could he say? He was planning essentially the same thing for himself, a solitary life in the wilderness, cut off from his own people, waiting for time or chance to end it. They were both slowly dying, just in different ways. He turned back to his work, the moment of connection fading into awkward silence. But the melody of the lullaby stayed with him, and without thinking about it, he began to hum again. This time, Kreshka joined in. Her voice was deeper than his, rough from injury and emotion, but it harmonized with his humming in a way that made the song richer, fuller. They did not speak, did not acknowledge what they were doing, but for several minutes the cabin was filled with the sound of an old orc lullaby sung by two voices that should have been enemies. When the song ended naturally, trailing off into silence, Adrian realized he felt lighter somehow. Not happy exactly, but less burdened, as if some small part of the weight he carried had been shared, lessened. Thank you, Kreshka said softly, for learning it, for singing it with me. It means more than you know. Thank you for teaching it to me, even if you did not mean to. The days that followed settled into a routine. Adrian would wake early, usually after only a few hours of fitful sleep, and check on Kreshka's wounds. He changed bandages, cleaned the stitches, monitored for signs of infection. She was a stoic patient, rarely complaining even when he knew the process was painful. In return, she told him tales of orc culture, of the Iron Ridge clan, of the old ways that were slowly dying as the world changed. He learned that orcs valued strength above all else, but that strength came in many forms. Physical prowess in battle, yes, but also the strength to endure suffering, to make hard choices, to protect those weaker than yourself. He learned that orc clans were matriarchal at their core, with the eldest females holding the real power, even if the men held the titles of chief and war leader. He learned that orcs believed the stars watched over them, that each clan had its own constellation that guided their destiny. In return, he told her about life in the human kingdoms, about the politics and intrigue that had led to the war, about the farm where he had grown up before his conscription. He did not talk about the war itself, not yet, but he found himself talking about everything else. She was a good listener, asking questions that showed she was truly interested rather than just being polite. As the days passed, Kreshka grew stronger. By the end of the first week, she could sit up on her own and feed herself. By the end of the second, she could stand and walk slowly around the cabin, though her broken arm was still useless and her side would seize with pain if she moved too quickly. "I should be helping more," she said one morning as Adrian prepared breakfast. You are doing all the work while I lie about like a lazy chief's daughter. You are healing. That is work enough. He set a plate of fried eggs and some of the last apples from his small orchard in front of her. Besides, what would you do? You cannot chop wood with one arm, and the garden is already prepared for winter. I could cook. I know my way around a fire. Your orcish cooking might kill me. I have heard stories. Kreshka threw an apple at him, which he caught easily. Orc cooking is perfectly fine. Better than this bland human food you keep making. Bland. I will have you know this is a traditional human breakfast prepared with love and care. It is eggs and apples. There is no preparation involved. They were both grinning now, and Adrian realized with a start that he was enjoying himself. Actually enjoying a conversation, trading jokes and barbs like a normal person. When had that last happened? Before the war, certainly. Maybe even before his conscription. Fine, he said, sitting down with his own plate. Tomorrow you can cook breakfast, but if you poison me, I am going to be very upset. If I poison you, you will be too dead to be upset. Fair point. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Kreshka said, "Can I ask you something?" About the war. Adrian's good mood evaporated instantly. You can ask. I might not answer. Why did you fight? In the human armies, I mean, you do not seem like someone who loves battle. I do not. I never did. Adrian pushed the eggs around on his plate. I was conscripted. When you turn 18 in the kingdom, your name goes into a lottery. If it comes up, you serve a minimum of 4 years in the military. Mine came up. And you could not refuse. Not without being branded a coward and imprisoned. And my family, they were proud. My father had served his father before him. It was tradition, they said, an honor. He laughed bitterly. So I went, learned to fight, learned to kill. And when the orc wars started, they sent us to the border. How many did you kill? The question was blunt, direct in the orc way. I do not know. Dozens, maybe. In battle, you do not stop to count, you just survive. He met her eyes. Does it bother you, knowing I killed orcs? Kreshka considered this. It should. By all rights, I should hate you for it, but I do not. You did not start the war, you did not choose to fight. You were forced, just as my brother was forced, just as all the young orcs and humans were forced. The ones I hate are the leaders who sent us to die for their pride. Your father. Yes, and your king, and all the others who sat in their safe halls and ordered us to kill each other. She set down her fork. My brother was 17 when he died. 17. Barely more than a child, but he was big and strong, so they gave him an axe and sent him to the front lines. He wrote to me in the early days. He was scared. He did not want to die, did not want to kill. But he did both because that was what the clan demanded. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. I am sorry, truly. No one that young should have to make those choices. No, but they did. We did. Kreshka reached across the table with her good hand and after a moment's hesitation, touched his fingers. And now we carry the weight of it. Together, it seems. Her skin was warmer than he expected, rougher too, but the touch felt grounding. Real. He did not pull away. Together, he agreed. That night, Adrian woke from a nightmare with his usual gasp and surge of adrenaline. But this time, instead of lying in the dark fighting the memories alone, he heard something. Soft, low, almost hypnotic. The lullaby. Kreshka was humming the lullaby. She was still in the bed. He had been sleeping on the floor by the fireplace, insisting she needed the bed more, but she had propped herself up on the pillows. In the dim glow of the banked fire, her eyes were open and fixed on him. Bad dream? She asked, though it was not really a question. Adrian nodded, not trusting his voice yet. His heart was still hammering, his breath coming in short gasps. Come here, Kreshka said. Sit by the bed. He did, dragging the blanket with him and settling on the floor with his back against the bed frame. She continued to hum, and he felt the tension slowly drain from his body. The melody wove through his mind, pushing out the images of blood and death, replacing them with something gentler. "Does it help?" she asked, pausing the song. "Yes," he said, surprised by how true it was. "It does." "Thank you." My brother had nightmares too after his first battle. I would sit with him and sing until he could sleep again. Her voice was sad but steady. I wish I could have been there for his last nightmare, the one he never woke from. Adrian reached up and found her hand in the darkness. "I am sure he felt you with him at the end. The people we love never truly leave us." "I hope so. I like to think his spirit found peace, that the stars welcomed him." She squeezed his hand. "Do you want to talk about the dream?" It was the usual: fire, screaming, friends dying. The smell of burning flesh. He swallowed hard. "And the face of the last orc I killed. A young one, probably your brother's age. He was wounded, could barely stand, and I did not have to kill him. I could have let him surrender, but orders were to take no prisoners, so I did not. And now he haunts you. Every night. I see his eyes, the way he looked at me, not with hate, with understanding, like he knew I was just following orders, that I did not want to do it, but I did it anyway." Kreshka was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. "The dead do not hate us for surviving. They pity us for having to carry the weight. You gave that boy a quick death. Many were not so merciful. That does not make it right. No, but it makes you human. And that is more than many of your commanders could claim." She tugged on his hand. "Come up here. The floor is cold and you need proper rest." "I am fine down here. Adrian, get in the bed. It is big enough for two, and I am tired of arguing with you." He wanted to protest, to maintain the proper distance between them. But the truth was he was exhausted, and the floor was cold, and her presence was the only thing that had helped push back the nightmares. So he climbed into the bed, careful to leave space between them, careful not to jostle her injuries. Kreshka resumed humming, and Adrian found his eyes growing heavy. For the first time in 8 months, he felt safe enough to truly sleep. He closed his eyes and let the lullaby carry him away. He woke 8 hours later to full daylight streaming through the window. 8 hours, an entire night of unbroken sleep. He sat up in shock, disoriented, and found Kreshka watching him with a small smile. "You slept," she said. Yes, I did. I actually did." He ran a hand through his hair, marveling at the feeling of being rested. Not completely rested, it would take more than one night to make up for 8 months of insomnia, but better than he had felt in so long. The lullaby. It worked. "Old clan magic," Kreshka said, tapping her temple. "Passed down through generations. Or maybe just the comfort of not being alone. Either way, you slept. And I suspect you will sleep again tonight if I am here." The implication hung in the air between them. If I am here. Because eventually she would be healed enough to leave, and then what? Would the nightmares return? Would he go back to his half-existence, trudging through days without rest? "You could stay," he said before he could think better of it. "Not just until you are healed. Stay longer, stay. As long as you want." Kreshka's eyes widened. "You do not know what you are asking. If people find out you are sheltering an orc permanently, they will come. They will drive me away or worse, and you will be marked as a traitor. The nearest settlement is a day's ride away. No one comes out here, and even if they did, this is my land. I will shelter who I choose." He met her gaze steadily. "I know it is selfish. I know I am asking you to stay because it helps me, but maybe it helps you too. You said you did not want to die alone in the wilderness, so do not. Stay here. We can help each other." She was silent for a long time, studying his face as if trying to read his true intentions. Finally, she said, "I will stay through the winter. It is too dangerous to travel now with snow coming. In the spring, we will talk again, see if this arrangement still makes sense." It was not a commitment, but it was not a rejection either. Adrian felt relief flood through him. Through the winter, then. They shook on it, her large, rough hand engulfing his, and the deal was made. The weeks that followed transformed both of them. As Kreshka healed, she insisted on helping with the daily work despite Adrian's protests. She learned to do one-handed tasks, feeding the chickens he kept in a small coop, gathering the last vegetables from the garden, even helping to split wood by holding the log steady while he swung the axe. In return, she taught him more songs. Not just lullabies, but work songs, celebration songs, songs of mourning and loss. He had a decent voice, she told him, and he learned quickly. Soon, they were singing together as they worked, orc melodies mixing with human harmonies in ways that should not have worked, but somehow did. The first snow came in early November, a light dusting that made the forest look magical. Kreshka stood on the porch and watched it fall with an expression of wonder. "We do not get much snow in the Iron Ridge lands," she said. "This is beautiful." "Wait until it is 3 feet deep and you are trying to walk through it," Adrian said, but he was smiling. "Then tell me how beautiful it is. I will love it even then. It is clean, pure. It covers all the old scars and makes the world new again." He came to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "Is that what you want, to make things new?" "I want to stop carrying the past like a stone around my neck." She glanced at him. "Do you think that is possible?" "I am starting to think it might be." As winter settled in properly, they fell into an even deeper routine. Adrian had laid in supplies for a solitary winter, and it was tight sharing them with 2 people, but they made it work. He showed Kreshka how to ice fish in the stream that bordered his property, and she showed him how to make snares that actually worked properly. She was a far better hunter than him, even with one arm still splinted. Her arm was healing well, he was pleased to note. The break was knitting properly, and by December he judged it safe to remove the splint. She flexed her fingers, rotated her wrist, and grinned. "Good as new." "Well, almost. It will be weak for a while, but I can use it." "No heavy lifting yet," Adrian warned. "You will undo all my careful work." "Yes, healer." She said it mockingly, but there was affection in her tone. That night, as they shared a dinner of rabbit stew and root vegetables, Kreshka said, "I have been thinking about the spring." Adrian's heart sank. He had been carefully not thinking about spring, about the day when she would leave and he would be alone again. "What about it?" "I do not want to go. I mean, I will if you want me to, if I am a burden or if you have tired of me. But if the offer still stands, I would like to stay. Longer than winter, maybe. Permanently." He stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "You would do that? Give up any chance of rejoining orc society?" "What society? I was cast out, remember. And even if I were not, I have learned something these past months. I have learned that I like this life. Quiet, simple, away from the politics and violence of the clans. I like working the land, fishing the stream, singing in the evenings." She paused, then added more quietly, "I like being with you." Adrian felt warmth spread through his chest. "I like being with you too, more than like. You have given me something I thought was lost forever: peace. Hope. A reason to wake up each morning that is not just survival. So I can stay. Yes. God, yes. Stay as long as you want. Stay forever if that is what you wish." Kreshka smiled, and it transformed her face from handsome to beautiful. "Forever is a very long time. I am willing to try if you are." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Then we have an agreement." But as winter deepened, they both knew that the real test was still to come. They could hide here in the wilderness during the cold months when travel was difficult, but spring would bring people, traders, hunters, perhaps even soldiers checking the frontier territories. And if anyone discovered an orc living with a human, there would be consequences. The test came sooner than expected. It was late January, during one of those bitter cold spells where even going outside to tend the animals was an ordeal. Adrian was in the barn, mucking out the stalls when he heard Kreshka shout from the cabin. Not a scream of pain or fear, but a warning. He grabbed the pitchfork, still the closest thing he had to a weapon, and ran. 3 men on horseback were in his clearing. They wore the rough furs and leather of frontier trappers, but the swords at their sides and the hardness in their eyes spoke of military training. Veterans like him, who had come to the wilderness to escape civilization. Kreshka stood on the porch, her body language tense and ready for a fight. The men were staring at her with a mixture of shock and hostility. "You have got an orc," the lead rider said, his hand moving to his sword hilt. "On human lands, that is against the treaty accords." Adrian stepped forward, pitchfork held loosely but ready. "This is my land and she is my guest. The treaty says nothing about private citizens offering hospitality. The treaty says orcs are to stay on clan lands and humans on ours." The man spat on the ground. "You are harboring the enemy." "The war is over," Adrian said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "She is not the enemy, she is just someone trying to survive the winter. She is a greenskin. They are all enemies, always have been, always will be." The lead man turned to his companions. "We should take care of this. Do everyone a favor." They started to dismount, and Adrian knew with sick certainty that this was about to turn violent. He tightened his grip on the pitchfork, calculating odds. 3 armed men against 1 man with a farming tool and an orc woman who was still recovering from serious injuries. The math was bad, but before anyone could make a move, Kreshka spoke. "I challenge." The men paused. Adrian looked at her in confusion, but she kept her eyes on the riders. "What did you say?" the lead man asked. "I invoke the right of challenge as laid out in the Treaty of Broken Stones, Article 12. Any orc accused of violating the peace may demand trial by combat to prove their innocence or right to exist in disputed territory." Kreshka stepped down from the porch, moving with the fluid grace of a warrior despite her recent injuries. "I challenge the accuser to single combat. If I win, I have the right to remain on this land. If I lose, I will leave or die as you see fit." "Kreshka, no," Adrian said. "You are not healed enough for this." She shot him a look. "I am healed enough, and this is the only way that ends without bloodshed." The lead man grinned, an ugly expression. "Fine. I accept your challenge, Greenskin, but when I win, your human friend here gets charged with harboring an enemy. That is a hanging offense." "And when I win," Kreshka said, "you 3 leave and never return, and you spread the word that this land is neutral territory under treaty protection." "Agreed." The man dismounted and drew his sword. "Let us see what you are made of, orc." Adrian wanted to protest, to stop this, but he knew orc culture well enough by now to know that interfering in a formal challenge was the worst insult possible. He could only stand back and watch as the 2 combatants faced off in the snow. The man was bigger than Kreshka, with longer reach. But Kreshka was an orc, with strength and endurance that humans could not match. More importantly, she was fighting for her home, her life, her future. The man was just fighting for pride. They circled each other, boots crunching in the snow. The man lunged first, a probing strike that Kreshka dodged easily. He followed up with a series of quick slashes, testing her defenses. She deflected them with the short sword she had grabbed from inside the cabin, Adrian's old military blade that he had brought in from the woods and cleaned, unable to quite let it go. The fight was brutal and fast. The man was skilled, but Kreshka was driven. She took a cut on her shoulder but delivered a punishing kick to his knee that made him stumble. He swung wildly and she caught his wrist, twisting until he dropped the sword. Then she had him in a hold, her arm around his throat, squeezing. "Yield," she said, her voice tight with effort. "Yield and this ends." For a moment, Adrian thought the man was stubborn enough to let himself pass out or die, but survival instinct won. "I yield," he gasped. Kreshka released him and stepped back. The man collapsed in the snow, coughing and gasping. His companions made no move to help him, though they watched Kreshka with new wariness. "The challenge is complete," Kreshka said formally. "I have won. The terms are binding." The lead man struggled to his feet, one hand rubbing his throat. "Fine, you have got your neutral territory. But mark me, Orc, the day you step off this land, you are fair game." "I will not be leaving," Kreshka said. "This is my home now." The men remounted and rode off without another word. Adrian watched until they disappeared into the trees, then ran to Kreshka. She was trembling, reaction setting in, and blood was seeping through her shirt from the cut on her shoulder. "You are hurt," he said, already guiding her toward the cabin. "I am fine. It is shallow." But she leaned on him, and he could feel how much the fight had taken out of her. "Did I do right?" "By invoking the challenge. You saved both our lives and our home. Yes, you did right. But God, Kreshka, you scared me." "I scared myself. But I have fought in wars, Adrian. I know how to survive." Inside, he cleaned and bandaged her new wound, adding it to the collection of scars she was accumulating. As he worked, she said, "You realize what this means. Everyone will know soon. The human who lives with an orc on neutral land. We will be marked, watched. Let them watch. Let them talk." He met her eyes. "You said this is your home now. Is that true?" "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt. "This is my home. You are my home." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning they had been dancing around for weeks. Adrian set aside the bandages and took her face in his hands carefully, as if she might startle and run. "You are my home too," he said. "You are the reason I sleep at night, the reason I wake up, the reason I am not just existing anymore, but living." "Adrian," he kissed her. It was tentative at first, uncertain, neither of them quite sure how this worked when one was human and one was orc. But then she kissed him back, her tusks pressing gently against his face, her lips warm and soft, and it felt right. Perfect, even. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kreshka smiled. "So we are doing this, really doing this. If you want to, I want to. I have wanted to for weeks, but I did not think. I did not know if you could see me that way, as more than a patient or a friend." "I see you as everything," Adrian said. "As the woman who saved my sanity, who gave me back the ability to sleep, who made me believe life was worth living again. As beautiful and strong and brave, as mine if you will have me. I am already yours. I have been for a while now." She pulled him close, careful of both their injuries. "And you are mine. We will figure out the rest together." That night, they lay in bed together, not as patient and healer, not as reluctant roommates, but as partners. Kreshka hummed the lullaby, and Adrian joined in, and they fell asleep wrapped around each other. The rest of the winter passed in a haze of happiness that neither of them had thought possible. They worked together, ate together, slept together. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. They learned each other's bodies and hearts with the same care and attention. But as the snow began to melt and spring approached, reality intruded. One morning in early March, Kreshka said, "We need to talk about the future, seriously." Adrian looked up from the seeds he was sorting for planting. "What about it? We cannot stay here forever in isolation. We need supplies, trade goods, and you have a homestead to maintain, fields to plant. You will need to go to the settlement eventually, deal with other humans." She paused. "And I will need to figure out my legal status. If I am living on human lands permanently, there may be paperwork, official recognition under the treaty. You are right. I have been avoiding thinking about it, but you are right. He set down the seeds. We should go together, to the settlement, present a united front. They will hate me, hate us both for being together. Probably, but we knew this would not be easy. He took her hand. We face it together, or not at all. So in late March, when the roads were passable again, they saddled Adrian's horse and made the day-long journey to Millbrook, the nearest human settlement. It was a small frontier town, maybe 200 people, built around a trading post and a mill. Adrian had been there once when he first arrived in the territory to register his claim on the abandoned homestead. They arrived in the late afternoon, and the reaction was immediate. People stopped in the street to stare. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. A few people made warding signs, old superstitions about orcs being evil spirits. Adrian ignored them all and headed straight for the trading post. The owner, a weathered man named Caleb, looked up from his ledger and did a double take. Voss, did not expect to see you again, and you brought company. This is Kreshka. She is living on my land. Adrian set his list on the counter. I need these supplies. I can trade labor or furs. Caleb looked at the list, then at Kreshka, then back at Adrian. You are serious about this, about keeping an orc on your property. She is not property. She is my partner. Adrian kept his voice level but firm. And we are here legally under the terms of the Treaty of Broken Stones. Do you have a problem with that, me? No, Caleb shrugged. I have seen enough in my years to know that the world is more complicated than most folks want to believe. If you vouch for her, that is good enough for me. He started gathering the items from the list. But others in town are not going to be so understanding. You know that, right? We know. As if summoned by the words, the trading post door slammed open and 3 men entered. Adrian recognized them, the trappers from the winter, including the one Kreshka had bested in the challenge. His heart sank. So it is true, the lead man said. The human and the orc coming to town like decent folk, like they have any right. We have every right, Adrian said, stepping slightly in front of Kreshka. The challenge was settled. The land is neutral, the land sure, but this is our town, human town, no greenskins allowed. The man's hand moved to his sword. You should leave, now. We are conducting legal business, Kreshka said, her voice calm but her muscles tense. We have broken no laws. You exist. That is crime enough. The man drew his sword and his companions followed suit. The trading post went silent. Caleb cursed under his breath and started to reach for something under the counter, probably a weapon. Adrian's mind raced, calculating options. 3 armed men in close quarters with civilians around. This could turn into a massacre fast. But before anyone could move, the door opened again and a woman walked in. She was old, maybe 70, with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone used to being obeyed. She took one look at the drawn swords and snorted. Put those away, you idiots. There will be no bloodshed in this town. Not while I am mayor. The lead man hesitated. Mayor Winters, this orc is conducting legal business, as she stated. The Treaty of Broken Stones explicitly allows for orcs on human territory if they are registered and sponsored by a human citizen. She turned to Adrian. I assume you are sponsoring her. Yes, madam. She lives on my land with my full knowledge and consent. Then we need to make that official. Come with me to the town office. We will draw up the paperwork. Mayor Winters fixed the 3 men with a hard stare. As for you 3, if you draw weapons in my town again without cause, you will spend a month in the lockup. Clear. They muttered agreement and sheathed their swords, though the hatred in their eyes did not diminish. They left, and the tension in the room eased slightly. Thank you, Kreshka said to the mayor. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. I am mayor. Keeping the peace is my job. She gestured toward the door. Now come on. Let us make your presence here official so these frontier hotheads do not have an excuse to cause trouble." The paperwork took an hour, and by the end of it, Kreshka was officially registered as a resident of human territory under Adrian's sponsorship. It felt strange, reducing their relationship to legal documents, but Adrian understood the necessity. The world ran on rules and records, and having official sanction would protect them from the worst of the harassment. As they left the town office, Mayor Winters said, "I am not going to lie to you. This will be hard. People fear what they do not understand, and an orc-human couple is something most folks have never conceived of. You will face prejudice, maybe violence, but the law is on your side and I will enforce it." "We appreciate that," Adrian said. "We are not asking people to accept us, just to leave us alone. That much I can try to ensure." She studied them both. "For what it is worth, I think what you are doing is brave. The war ended, but the hate lingers. Maybe seeing you two together will remind people that we are not so different after all." They collected their supplies from Caleb and headed back toward Adrian's homestead. The journey home was quiet, both of them processing the day's events. Finally, as they neared the cabin, Kreshka said, "Do you regret it, making things official?" "No, do you?" "No, but I worry. Those men, they will not stop, and there will be others like them. Then we deal with them as they come together." Adrian reached over and squeezed her hand. "I am not giving up on this, on us. Not now, not ever. Good, because neither am I." Spring gave way to summer, and they threw themselves into the work of the homestead. Adrian taught Kreshka about farming, planting, weeding, irrigating. She taught him about foraging, about reading the forest for edible plants and medicinal herbs. Together, they made the land productive in ways Adrian never could have alone. Word spread about the human and orc living together. Some people were curious, stopping by the homestead under the guise of trading or asking for help with various tasks. Adrian suspected Mayor Winters had sent some of them, trying to build bridges. A few were genuinely friendly. Most were just nosy, but there were also the hostile ones. Twice more, they had confrontations with groups who wanted to drive Kreshka away. Each time, they stood their ground, citing the law and the treaty. Once, Adrian had to draw his sword. He had retrieved it from the woods and now wore it when they went to town to make their point. The sight of him armed and ready to fight seemed to discourage further aggression. Through it all, their relationship deepened. On warm summer nights, they would sit on the porch and sing together, the old orc songs mixing with human ballads. They danced sometimes, teaching each other the traditional dances of their peoples, laughing at their mistakes. They made love under the stars in the cabin in the quiet meadow beyond the stream. In August, Kreshka said, "I want to do something for us." "What is that?" Among orcs, when two people commit to a life together, they perform a bonding ritual. They exchange vows before the stars, since the stars witness all things and keep all promises. She looked at him shyly. "I know humans have marriages with priests and ceremonies, but I thought, maybe we could do both, the orc way and the human way." Adrian felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Are you asking me to marry you? I am asking if you will bond with me, under the stars in the old way, and then, if you wish, we can go to Millbrook and have a human ceremony as well." "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Yes to all of it. I want to be bonded to you, married to you, tied to you in every way possible." They planned the orc bonding ritual for the next full moon. Kreshka taught him the words he needed to say in Orcish, and he practiced until his pronunciation was acceptable. They prepared offerings for the stars, bread they had baked together, wine they had traded for, flowers from the meadow. On the night of the full moon, they walked to the highest point on Adrian's land, a small hill that overlooked the valley. The sky was clear, stars blazing overhead. Kreshka had dressed in her best clothes, leather and furs decorated with beadwork she had made during the long winter. Adrian wore his finest shirt, one he had not touched since leaving the military. They stood facing each other, hands clasped, and Kreshka began to speak in Orcish. Her voice was strong and clear, carrying across the quiet night. Adrian did not understand every word. His Orcish was still rough, but he caught the meaning. She was promising to be his partner, his shelter, his strength. To stand with him against all enemies, to share his burdens, to celebrate his joys. When she finished, Adrian spoke his vows in return, the Orcish words clumsy on his tongue but heartfelt. He promised to honor her, to protect her, to be her home as she was his. To sing with her, to work beside her, to love her for as long as they both lived. They laid their offerings before the stars and spoke together the final words of the ritual. We are witnessed, we are bound, we are one. Then Kreshka produced a knife and cut her palm, letting blood well up. Adrian did the same. They pressed their bleeding palms together, letting their blood mingle. Blood to blood, Kreshka said. Life to life. What the stars have witnessed, let no one tear apart. What the stars have witnessed, Adrian echoed, let no one tear apart. They wrapped their joined hands in a cloth and stood together, looking up at the stars. Adrian felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. He was bound now, truly and completely, to this woman, this orc woman who had saved him in more ways than one. I love you, he said in common tongue. I do not think I have said that enough, but I do. I love you more than I knew was possible. I love you too, Kreshka said, her voice thick with emotion. My partner, my heart, my home. They stayed on the hill until dawn, wrapped in each other's arms, whispering promises and dreams to the stars. 2 weeks later, they went to Millbrook and asked Mayor Winters to perform a human marriage ceremony. She agreed, though she warned them that it would likely cause an uproar. Let it, Adrian said. We are doing this properly, both ways, so no one can claim our union is not legitimate. The ceremony was held in the town square with Mayor Winters officiating. A small crowd gathered, some out of genuine goodwill, others out of morbid curiosity. Adrian saw the trappers who had challenged them standing at the back, their faces twisted with disgust, but there were friendly faces too. Caleb from the trading post, a few of the farmers who had come to respect Adrian's work, an old woman who made a point of giving Kreshka a bouquet of wildflowers and whispering, "Good for you, dear. Love who you love." The ceremony was simple. They exchanged rings, plain iron bands that Adrian had forged himself in Caleb's smithy. They spoke vows in common tongue, promising to honor and cherish each other. Mayor Winters pronounced them husband and wife under human law, and it was done. As they walked back to their horse hand in hand, someone threw a rotten vegetable at them. It splattered against Adrian's shoulder. He tensed, ready for a fight, but Kreshka put a hand on his arm. It is just food, she said. They can throw all the vegetables they want. It does not change what we are to each other. She was right. They rode home together, and if they smelled slightly of rotten tomato, well, that was a small price to pay for legitimacy. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. They built their homestead into a thriving farm with fields of grain and vegetables, a flock of chickens, 2 cows, and a pair of goats. They traded regularly with Millbrook and even began to build a few genuine friendships. Caleb became a particular ally, always ready with supplies or advice. Slowly, very slowly, attitudes began to shift. Other mixed couples emerged, emboldened by Adrian and Kreshka's example. A human woman married an orc man. A human farmer took in an orc orphan. The presence of orcs on human lands became less shocking, more normal. Adrian never completely stopped having nightmares, but they came less frequently now, once a month instead of every night. And when they did come, Kreshka was there, humming the old lullaby, bringing him back to peace. 3 years after their bonding, Kreshka told him she was pregnant. Adrian was terrified and elated in equal measure. They had not even known if human and orc could have children together. It was so rare that there was no reliable information. "Whatever happens," he told her, hands on her still flat belly, "we face it together." "Together," she agreed. The pregnancy was difficult. Kreshka was sick for months, and there were complications that worried the midwife they brought in from Millbrook. But in the spring, as the world turned green and new again, she gave birth to a daughter. The baby was perfect. She had her mother's green skin, though lighter in tone, and her father's eyes. Small tusks were just visible in her gums. Her ears were pointed but not as pronounced as a full orc's. She was a bridge between two worlds, a symbol of what could be when people chose love over hate. They named her Lyra, after the constellation that had been overhead the night of their bonding. Holding his daughter for the first time, Adrian felt something inside him that had been broken since the war finally began to heal. This tiny person was hope made flesh. She was proof that new beginnings were possible, that the sins of the past did not have to define the future. "She is beautiful," Kreshka whispered, exhausted but glowing with joy. "Our daughter, our future." "Our everything," Adrian agreed. That night, with his wife and daughter sleeping peacefully in the bed, Adrian stood on the porch and looked up at the stars. He thought about the long journey that had brought him here, the war, the nightmares, the sleepless nights. The orc woman who had hummed a lullaby and saved him from drowning in despair. The love that had grown between them, impossible and inevitable. He began to hum the lullaby, the one that had started everything. Inside, Lyra stirred and made a soft cooing sound, as if she recognized the melody even at just a few hours old. Adrian smiled and continued singing, his voice carrying across the quiet homestead. In the years that followed, they would teach her the song. Teach her both languages, both cultures. Teach her to be proud of every part of herself, human and orc. They would face challenges. There would always be those who could not accept them, but they would face them together, as they always had. Adrian Voss had come to the frontier to escape, to hide from his past. Instead, he had found a future. He had found healing in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person. And he had learned that sometimes the things that save us are the things we never knew we needed. He thought he would never sleep again after the war, but he had been wrong. Because every night, he slept peacefully in the arms of the orc woman who had hummed an old clan lullaby and brought him home. The stars watched over them, as they always had and always would. And in the quiet cabin on the edge of the thornwood forest, a small family slept in peace, bound together by love and choice and the power of a simple song. Years later, when Lyra was old enough to understand, Adrian and Kreshka told her the story of how they met. How he had found her mother broken and bleeding in the night, how she had hummed a lullaby that cut through his nightmares, how they had healed each other, body and soul. "So Mama's song saved you?" Lyra asked, her young voice full of wonder. "Yes," Adrian said, pulling both his girls close. "The song and the woman who sang it. She gave me back my life." "Will you teach me the song?" Lyra asked. "So I can sing it too," Kreshka smiled and began to hum, and Adrian and Lyra joined in. 3 voices, 3 different tones, but in perfect harmony. The melody floated out through the open window and into the night, a reminder that love could bloom in the darkest places, that enemies could become family, and that sometimes the best medicine for a wounded soul was simply someone willing to sing you home. In Millbrook, people heard the distant music and smiled. The orc woman and her human husband singing with their daughter. It had become a familiar sound over the years, a marker of the changing times. In the forest, animals paused to listen. The song was old, older than the war, older than the treaties and the hatreds. It was a song of peace, of comfort, of home. And on the hill where Adrian and Kreshka had bonded under the stars, the grass grew green and the flowers bloomed bright. The stars looked down and remembered the promises spoken there. Promises kept, promises honored, promises that had created something beautiful out of something broken. Adrian Voss had not slept a full night since the war ended. But then the orc woman hummed an old clan lullaby and everything changed. He learned to sleep again, to love again, to hope again. And in teaching him those things, Kreshka had also learned them herself. They were each other's salvation, each other's home. And as they sang together in the gathering darkness, their voices twining like their hearts and lives, they knew that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them the same way they had faced everything else. Together, always together. The song ended and the night settled in soft and quiet. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low. Adrian pulled the covers up over his sleeping daughter, then climbed into bed beside his wife. She immediately curled into him, her head on his chest, her breathing already deepening into sleep. He lay there for a moment, savoring the weight of her against him, the sound of Lyra's soft snores from her small bed in the corner, the peace that had become his normal instead of his impossible dream. Then he closed his eyes and slept, deep and dreamless and whole, while outside the stars kept their vigil and the forest whispered its approval. The war was long over. The nightmares were fading, and in their place was something Adrian had thought he would never have again: a family, a home, a future. All because one night an orc woman had hummed an old clan lullaby and a broken soldier had chosen to help instead of hide. Sometimes, Adrian thought as sleep claimed him, the smallest acts of kindness change everything. A song in the darkness, a hand extended to a stranger, a choice to love instead of hate. These were the things that saved the world, one person at a time, and he and Kreshka were proof that it could be done. Their story would be told for generations, a reminder that love knows no boundaries, that healing is always possible, and that sometimes the best thing we can do is simply be there for each other, singing our songs in the dark until the dawn comes. The stars watched and remembered. And in the cabin on the edge of the thornwood, 3 hearts beat in harmony, a family forged from war and peace, from different worlds and shared dreams, from a song that had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. Adrian Voss slept peacefully, and he would continue to do so for the rest of his long and happy life. Because he had found what every wanderer seeks and every soldier dreams of. He had found home.